Hello my dear friends, you're in the military summary channel. In this video we're going to discuss the most important events that took place during the previous 12 hours. We have lots of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, and we will begin with the battle for the Sea of Azov. And according to my understanding of the situation, the battle for the Sea of Azov has ended. During the previous 12 hours, during the previous nights, the Ukrainians once again attacked vessels in the area of the Sea of Azov, and pro-Ukrainian sources stated that 28 vessels were damaged by the armored forces or even destroyed. And we have lots of videos on this matter published this morning where we can see either strikes carried out by the Ukrainians and the damaged vessels allegedly belong to the shadow fleet of the Russian Federation. So this is the situation. Once again, it seems that the battle for the Sea of Azov has ended. The Russians, according to information we have, were forced to stop the transit of vessels through this area. This information was published this morning by different sources. The Russian Federation is temporarily stopping navigation through the canal that connects the Don River and the Sea of Azov. Also, the Russian Federation has not been accepting applications for the passage of ships through the Crimean Bridge since Friday evening. So currently nobody can cross this territory. This is the Kerch Strait of Kerch, and nobody can use this territory for the export purposes. Furthermore, as for this territory, as for this part of the Russian Federation, we continue receiving updates about the situation in the city of Taganrog, and as you can see, the Ukrainians yesterday attacked the city, and now we see that the Ukrainians were targeting the oil infrastructure on the territory of the settlement, and here we have an oil tank that was destroyed by the Ukrainians. And as of the Sea of Azov, as we discussed just a minute ago, the Russians temporarily stopping navigation through the canal that connects the Don River and the Sea of Azov, and which means that currently the Russians are no longer able to use infrastructure of the city of Azov for export purposes. And this morning we start receiving first videos on this matter. In the port of Azov, Roston region, grain carriers are standing after the movement of vessels along the Azov Canal was stopped. So the Russians were forced to reduce activities in this area until the Russians are able to stabilize the situation. And the only way to stabilize the situation for the Russian side is to create a buffer zone like this through the Zaporozhye region, Kherson region, Nikolaev region, and the Odesa region. This is the only solution for Russians, but we see that the Russians are very far from this situation. But at the same time, the Russians are trying to find a solution how to reduce the pressure from the Ukrainian side. And for example, during the previous night, the Russians attacked the Odesa region, and lots of explosions and lots of videos were published on this matter. Through these pictures, we can see the consequences of attack on the city of Odesa during the overnight attack. And here we have more updates: a fire anomaly and very big smoke over this part of Odesa port infrastructure. Most likely the Ukrainians were using these facilities for import or export of goods, of products, or the Ukrainians were using these positions for military purposes. Furthermore, as for the city of Kherson, during the previous 12 hours, anomaly activity was recorded through the southwestern parts of the city, through the micro-district of Ostrov, and as you can see, lots of videos were published from this matter. It seems that the Russians are increasing their activities in this area. It seems that the Russians, with the purpose to urgently stabilize the situation, either received an order to get or to create immediate victory by landing troops in this side of the city of Kherson with the purpose to establish complete control over the territory, and maybe to force the Ukrainians to change their launching site positions a bit further in the northern direction. So it seems that the Russians will try to make something in this area in coming days. Now let's move further and let's discuss the Russian overnight attack, because the Russians also attacked the territory of Ukraine, and this morning the Minister of Defense of Ukraine stated that the Russians during the overnight attack used 133 air vehicles, including drones and missiles. The overnight attack wasn't a massive attack from the Russian side, it was just a regular attack, but the Russians used missiles. The Russians used 4 Ha-59 missiles and 6 Iskander-M missiles. And the Minister of Defense of Ukraine reported that the Ukrainians haven't intercepted even a single Iskander-M ballistic missile, and later this information was also confirmed by Zelensky. He said that now we don't bring down any Iskander ballistic missile because we don't have means for this. I think that Zelensky is bluffing. I think that Ukrainians have packed 3 interceptors, but Zelensky decided to keep them for a massive attack, which most likely is going to take place within the next several days. As for the previous attack, as was the overnight attack, Zelensky decided not to intercept ballistic missiles that were attacking the city of Kyiv. He has a limited number of these type of weapons, so once again he decided most likely to keep them for a massive attack. As for the overnight attack, before this overnight attack, pro-Ukrainian sources stated that the Russian army is reconnaissing targets in Kyiv and preparing dozens of missiles for attack. The monitoring resources of the armed forces report that on the night of July 10-11, Iskander-M installations equipped with 20 ballistic missiles are being prepared. So the Russians also were bluffing during the previous nights. They probably tried to force the Ukrainians, thinking that they would attack the territory of Ukraine with dozens of missiles, but the Russians used only 10 missiles. And this morning we start receiving first updates on this matter. According to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, according to pro-Ukrainian sources, at least 2 military facilities were hit by Russians between the 10th and 11th of July of 2026. The Russians attacked, according to information we have, this facility in the southwestern parts of the city of Kyiv, this one, and according to information we have, the Russians attacked this facility through the eastern parts of the city of Kyiv. The Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation published a list of enterprises that were hit by Russians, and these enterprises, according to the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation, are connected with production of different types of drones. As for this Odesa region, the Russians were attacking just logistics infrastructure, and up to 90% of Ukrainian agricultural export, key logistic hub for the armed forces of Ukraine, Port Chernomorsk, was attacked by Russians. Fuel storage tanks and military cargo infrastructure were damaged and destroyed by Russians. Furthermore, this morning we received a very important video from the area of the settlement of Pereislavske. If you remember, yesterday we received the report that the Russians, for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, attacked a fuel depot or an oil base or a gas station on the territory of the Kyiv region, and this video was published yesterday. And today, during the previous night, we received additional details about attack on this subject of energy infrastructure. This video was published by special services of Ukraine. Here we can see fire crews were trying to extinguish the fire in the area of the settlement by the name of Pereislavske, and we see that this oil base was completely wiped out by Russians as a result of the attack that took place between the 9th and 10th of July of 2026. Here we have another video published by pro-Ukrainian sources. Here we can see these fire crews that were trying to extinguish the fire. So this is the situation about the city of Kyiv and the Kyiv region, and once again there is still very high risk that during the next night between the 11th and the 12th of July of 2026 the Russians will carry out a massive attack through the entire territory of Ukraine. Now let's move further. Let's discuss additional strikes on targets that were carried out by Russians. According to different sources, the Russians attacked a facility in the northern parts of the Chernihiv region. Some barrack was destroyed by Russians. Probably the Ukrainians were using this barrack to store drones before launching deep inside of the territory of Russia. Furthermore, a railway station was attacked on the territory of the settlement of Trostyanets. This picture was published this morning. Here we can see fire crews of Ukraine were trying to extinguish the fire after the Russians attacked the territory. Furthermore, the Russians attacked and destroyed a gas station on the territory of the city of Kryvyi Rih. This video was published this morning. Here we can see fire that broke out right after Russians attacked the territory, and the Russians attacked the city of Zaporozhye. As for this territory, very heavy explosion took place during the night, and black smoke rose after the Russians attacked the territory. So the Russians, as we can see, continue pushing the Ukrainians through the territories along the line of combat contact in depth of 150 kilometers, trying to force the Ukrainians to move their launching sites as deep as possible in the direction of the central and the western parts of Ukraine, but we still see that Ukrainians have possibilities to carry out mid-range attacks in the direction of the Sea of Azov, and sometimes even to attack deep inside of the territory of Russia. Now let's move further and let's discuss the situation on the ground. During the previous 12 hours, we received lots of very interesting changes. So first, let's talk about the northern parts of the Sumy region. This morning, the Minister of Defense of the Russian Federation and the Group of Forces North confirmed that Russians, as a result of clashes, established complete control over the settlement by the name of Bochkivka. This information was provided by pro-Russian sources. Furthermore, as for this direction, according to the Group of Forces North, currently there are very heavy clashes for the settlement of Ulanovka. We expect that during the next week the Russians will finish the battle for this territory and the map would be adjusted once again. After the end of the battle for the settlements of Ulanovka and Bochkivka, most likely the Russians would continue further, first of all with the purpose to establish complete control over the settlement of Taganrog and to maintain the lines. And when it happens, the Russians will continue advancing further in the western direction towards the city by the name of Gulukhov. Now let's talk about the Sumy direction. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes were recorded as well, and these are the changes from the ground. This is the end of the 10th of July, and yesterday, for the first time since the beginning of the conflict on the territory of Ukraine, the Russians stated that first sabotage and reconnaissance groups entered the settlement of Mohritsia from the northeast, and today this information was also confirmed by different mappers, and these are the changes on the ground. So as you can see, the Russians began battle for this village of Mohritsia. This is a very big village that could be used by Russians to concentrate troops before moving further in the western direction and before moving in the northern direction, in the direction of the village of Sadki. So we see that the battle for the northern parts of the settlement of Psol is intensifying. We're talking about the territory between the current Russian positions and the river of Psol, and we're talking about this area. The Russians will try to take under complete control these territories during the next several months. Now let's move further and let's talk about the Kharkiv direction. The Russian offensive operation in the northeastern parts of the Kharkiv region intensifies. We have lots of changes on the ground and they are very interesting. First of all is that the pro-Russian sources for the first time since the beginning of the battle for the city of Belyi reported that the Russians managed to answer the city and to dig in deeper. And the first blocks and first streets of the settlement of Belyi, as you can see according to this map, were colored in Russian favor. The Russians continue advancing. If this information is correct, then most likely within the next 2-3 weeks the Russians would be able to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area, and the Russians would be able to maintain the lines in this area significantly. So we see that the northeastern parts of Kharkiv region, the collapse of the northeastern part of the Kharkiv region intensifies, and most likely in coming weeks the entire northeastern parts would be captured by Russians. At the same time, the Russians began advancing in the direction of the settlement of Kolodia. I would like to remind you that during the previous week, the Minister of Defense and the Group of Forces North reported about the end of the battle for the settlement of Pereislaske. Control over the settlement of Pereislaske allows the Russians to use the road for the logistic purposes, and now we see that the Russians began advancing along this road, and which means that the settlement of Kolodia is the next target of Russians. The Russians will continue their offensive operation with the purpose to get as close as possible to the settlement of Veliki Burluk. This is the next target for Russians after the end of the battle for the city of Belyi. If Ukrainians lose control over the settlements of Belyi and Veliki Burluk, then the next place where the Ukrainians have more or less reliable defense lines is the settlement of Shevchenkova. Moving further, let's discuss the situation in the Slavyansk-Konstantinovka agglomeration. During the previous 12 hours, additional changes on the ground were recorded along the Siversky Donets Canal. These are the changes, and these changes were made based on the video published by pro-Ukrainian sources, where we can see how Ukrainians were attacking Russians through these territories. Based on this video, we improve Russian positions in this area, and we see that the Russians continue consolidating their positions to the west of the Siversky Donets Canal, right in front of the city by the name of Kramatorsk, and the Russians continue advancing. Furthermore, we continue receiving updates from the pockets between the cities of Konstantinovka and Chasiv Yar. The Russians intensify their activities in this area. The Russians right now are tasked to maintain the lines and to cut the pockets and to force the Ukrainians to fall back from this area. This is a very important territory. If the Russians are able to take this pocket under complete control, this will improve the Russian logistics significantly between the cities of Konstantinovka, Chasiv Yar, and Bakhmut. As for the territory between the Zaporozhye and Dnipro directions, during the previous 12 hours, we haven't received anything special. The only thing that is important is that the Russians right now are conducting a major offensive operation in the direction of the village cities of Dobropillia and its agglomeration, so which means that in coming days we will continue receiving additional updates about the situation through this territory. As for the Orechov direction, it seems that the Russians right now are not planning to move further. The Russians right now are tasked to stabilize the situation and to repel Ukrainian attacks, and the Ukrainians carry out these attacks every single day. And that's it for the short video. The military summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes to my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.